My hair is getting longer and longer and stupider looking and losing all shape. In past episodes, vanity has caused me to wear a hat, but today I'm going hatless. As Chief Wiggum says, hatless today. I'm putting vanity aside and I don't care anymore. I need a haircut, but I have nowhere to go, so I have no reason to look good to get a haircut, and that's why I'm doing these videos, is because it has nothing to do. As I've mentioned every time, maybe if you've watched these before, you're tired of me hearing, I need a new introduction. Somebody give me some ideas. How do I introduce these videos? Today I'm going to talk about a band, by far the most obscure band. Well, maybe last time, Broken Teeth was more obscure. This is very different this time. This is not Metallica or Iron Maiden or Kiss. This is Saigon Kick I'm going to talk about today. Saigon Kick is a band that if you're watching this, there are probably two types of people watching this. I think there are two people maybe watching this. The one type that is interested in this is the person that is the real hardcore Saigon Kick fan. Maybe you liked them in the 90s or something like that. You're a real fan. Or the other type is the type that you have no idea who they are, but you're looking for some new music. It's not new music. I mean, they're a band that's been around for a long time, but they might be new to you. And some people like getting new musical recommendations. This is for both of those types of people. Maybe there's a third group of people who just like to see a guy standing in front of a camera in his house talking about random crap. And that's what I'm going to do today. Saigon Kick is a band. They started, I guess, I'm giving you the Wikipedia version now. I guess they started in 89 or 90 in Florida, South Florida, maybe in Coral Springs or in the Miami area, something like that. Very, very different. A lot of these other bands I've talked about their discography, I've gotten into them maybe a little bit later in their career. Faith No More, I get into them on their third album. Kiss on their fourth album. Saigon Kick, I was into them right from the start. And I'm going to tell you my Saigon Kick story before I get to their discography. Now, if I remember correctly, as you I don't want to say as you get older, but as time passes, you don't forget things, but stories kind of morph together, or you forget details, or details change or something. Or maybe you misremember. That's a Roger Clemens thing. If anybody remembers, Roger Clemens said he misremembered. You misremember things, but I'm going to tell you my version of this story with Saigon Kick. I'm stretching this out already. This has probably been about 3 minutes of garbage. If I remember correctly, it was a Saturday I know for sure it was March 1991. And if I remember correctly, it was a Saturday. And I turned on Much Music. I lived in Toronto at the time. And Much Music, I used to watch a lot of Much Music. And I turned on Much Music. And it was a Saturday afternoon, and they were interviewing a couple of guys. I think it was two of them. One guy was called Jason Beeler. The other guy was Matt Kramer. And they were from a band called Saigon Kick. And I'd never heard them before, never seen them before. I had no idea they existed. But the reason they were on Much Music was they were promoting themselves and promoting their show. If I remember correctly, I know this part is true. They're opening for Cheap Trick. Everybody knows Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick was playing at Massey Hall in Toronto. I want to say it was that night. It was that Saturday night. Maybe it was the next day. But Saigon Kick was opening for Cheap Trick. And so they were doing a little thing in the studio and in the Much Music. They called it the Much Music environment, I think, instead of a studio. And so they were talking, and these guys had long hair. And, at the time, I probably had longer hair than them. I was and still am a metalhead, despite the short, stupid hair. And so when you turn on Much Music and you saw guys with long hair back then, right away you thought they must be in a cool band. There are some exceptions. And so I watched these guys, and they talked about the band Saigon Kick. And then they played the video. The video was for a song called What You Say. What you say and what you do is a contradiction of the life that's safe and sound. And I hate saying this, people, when you hear about people in bands or people talking about when they first heard a band, they say, I was blown away, it blew me away, or something like that. I was blown away, man. I couldn't believe there was such a band as good as this, as Saigon Kick. So they played this video for the song called What You Say. Now, what I remember correctly, and nobody can prove me wrong, so we'll say this is the truth. I immediately, when that video was over and when the interview was over, I went to, I lived in a place called Guelph, Ontario at the time, and there was a place called Stone Road Mall, and still is a place called Stone Road Mall. And I immediately, this was back in the day when it was very easy to buy records or CDs. They had everything. I went to Stone Road Mall at the record store. It was probably HMV. I think it was HMV that I bought it. And I went into the S section and I found, I'm sure they didn't have their own section, but I looked in miscellaneous S, and I found this one. This is the first Saigon Kick album. This has, as you can see, the second song was What You Say. This was the song I had just heard minutes before. There's another band that I did this with too. When I heard them, I went out immediately, literally, as soon as I heard it, I ran out and get it. I think I'm going to do a video about that band later. We'll see. That's a tease. We call it a tease in the industry. So Saigon Kick, I bought this album immediately. And this was back in the day when, and if you're of a certain age, you'll know what I'm talking about. That was all you needed. One song was your gateway to buy the album. And, you know, now it's very different. Obviously, you have Spotify, and you can make playlists, and you can download specific songs, things like that. But back then, God, this makes me sound so old, but back then, if you heard something and you liked it, you went, I have throat problems. Hope it's not coronavirus. You went and you bought the album. So I bought this album and I took it home, and every song was I loved every song as much as I loved What You Say. And now stopping about this album for a while, this was my Saigon Kick. I could make the argument they're my favorite band of the 90s. Them and a couple of other ones, again, another tease. One of the bands that I just kind of mentioned, and another one were also front runners for me, the bands that really kept me super interested in music. Saigon Kick was one of the top three for sure. They were, they were, I mean, if you look at them, they didn't look like other bands at the time. Other bands at the time, at least musically that I like, you know, it was like Skid Row and Motley Crue, and still Metallica, of course, and Slayer and things like that. But Saigon Kick had a different look. Saigon Kick kind of, maybe a little bit earlier, a few years earlier, Jane's Addiction and Faith No More kind of showed me that music could be heavy, but it didn't have to be heavy metal. And I hope people understand what I'm talking about. Because to me, Saigon Kick wasn't metal, but they were heavy. They had really heavy riffs and you know, kind of that angst and angry. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying they sounded like Jane's Addiction, because they didn't. And they didn't sound, I'm not saying they sounded like Faith No More. They also didn't sound like Faith No More. But they made me realize that they were another one of those bands that music can be really heavy, very beautiful, but it's not Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. So getting back to this album, every song was as good as What You Say, and every song was as good as everything that came before it. Very different, very unique. They didn't sound, Saigon Kick didn't sound like anybody. I'm saying they reminded me of Jane's Addiction and Faith No More. They clearly didn't sound like them. This was and they weren't. This was a few months before 10 came out and before Nevermind came out, so you can't say they were grunge. This album still is incredible. I don't know why people didn't really embrace this album. Maybe it was a timing thing. If this had come out a year or two earlier, or maybe a year, probably not a year or two later, but everybody should have loved this album. This should have been one that brought everybody together. This should have been what 10 ended up being, or Nirvana. Everybody should have liked this. Metal fans should have liked this. You know, just casual music fans. This is just an incredible album. For me, an all-time classic of the 90s. When you're talking about debut albums, not in terms of success, this is in terms of, I keep saying this word, impact. This for me was like Appetite for Destruction, just 4 years later. It was like 10, but a few months, like I said, maybe 5 months earlier than 10. And just incredible. So this album, Saigon Kick, I'm going to talk about when I do these things, kind of my favorite songs. Probably it's hard to pick one, as it should be with all good albums, but maybe Coming Home is one of my favorite. That was a really, really very, very heavy song. And then it had a really nice part in the middle. You fall in love with the lust. You fall in love with the sex. You fall in love with faith. The faith. I won't continue, but yeah, that was maybe a good one. They had some really heavy ones on this. What Do You Do? What Do You Do? Was kind of a little bit of a punky song. It had a very punk attitude, very aggressive, kind of an angry, very look at the guy with the long hair and you know, that type of song. It was very heavy, and also Month of Sundays was very heavy. That was a song about like serial killers, I guess. Ugly was a heavy song, but just some beautiful, beautiful stuff on here. Colors, Susie, some acoustic stuff. My Life, clearly Beatles influence there. You couldn't pigeonhole this band. You couldn't pinpoint them. Like I said, they didn't sound like anybody. This was for me a real introduction to a new style of music, and nobody really ever sounded like them after. They weren't a big influence. They were never big enough, I guess, to be an influence. But I know a lot of bands liked Saigon Kick. I remember Doug Pinnick from King's X, I think, was raving about Saigon Kick, and who else? A couple of people. There were when you read back then, again, making me sound old, when you used to read magazines. In '91, I guess it was mostly Rip magazine that I was reading. Bands, I remember bands. I wish I could remember who they are, but they talked about this album and talked about Saigon Kick. And maybe a part of the reason why they didn't. This has been a debate for decades now over why, you know, people talk, why weren't they bigger, or they should have been bigger. They were kind of weird because maybe they didn't fit in. They did do shows with Faith No More, but they also did shows with Rat. And maybe, I think, I love Rat. They were, I think, maybe over the head of Rat fans. And I'm a huge Rat fan. I just did their discography, I think, in the last video I did. But I think they wouldn't go over with a Rat crowd, maybe more with a Faith No More crowd. Cheap Trick, as I said, was my introduction. They were playing with Cheap Trick. I don't know if a Cheap Trick crowd would get them, so they had some weird shows. But this one right here, this album from 1991 was just incredible. 14 songs. Jeff Scott Soto sings on a couple of them. I can't remember which one. Maybe I See You and Come Take Me Now, I think, the last songs. But this really is a huge album for me. I can't tell you how much I love this album. Yet it's not my favorite. First one, Saigon Kick. Now it's I'm going to get right to it. This was The Lizard, 1992. I like this, I think, even more than the first album, which is pretty amazing. When you really like something that much, it's hard to like something more. But this album came out, I think, in the summer of 92, maybe around May or June 92. And I bought it immediately, and I thought, man, they're even better. This album was even better than the first one. Now, over the years, that kind of, my opinion kind of changes. It reminds me of, again, with Faith No More, The Real Thing and Angel Dust. Which one do I like better? Who cares? It doesn't matter. But sometimes when I listen to this, I think, this is clearly the best one. And sometimes when I listen to the first one, I think, no, that's the best one. Same with The Real Thing and Angel Dust, which I talked about in that video. But this was not that much different than the first album. It had the same kind of vibe. There was, again, some really, really super catchy stuff, some really heavy stuff. I think Jason Biehler, which I'm going to talk about him a lot more as I continue to entertain you. Jason Biehler, I'm going to talk about him right now. He might be, you know, metal fans especially, I think, more than pop fans or rap fans or country fans, whatever. We like to compartmentalize things. I don't know if that's, I think that's the word. We like to, you know, we like things in packages. So you have your favorite this and your best that. And, you know, the 90s and the 80s and the hair metal and things like that. So if the topic of favorite guitars comes up, I can't say, and it's kind of stupid to think about this now, you know, when you're a teenager, it's okay. I don't know if Jason Biehler is my favorite guitarist, but he's pretty close. I mean, I heard Eddie Van Halen when I was 10 years old or 11 years old. And, but man, for this time, for 91, when Saigon Kick came out, that kind of, the Guitar Hero was a little bit dead at that time. In my opinion, Jason Biehler should have been, and maybe still should be, considered up there with who else at the time? I don't know, the you know, Yngwie Malmsteen or whoever the Guitar Heroes were, although I never liked those guys. The thing I liked about Jason was that he was also in a great band. Now, to make that even more amazing, he might be, you know, when I think about my favorite singers, who cares? And that list changes over time. It could be Eddie Vedder, Mike Patton, James Hetfield. I would put Jason Biehler in that group of anybody. So when you combine singer and guitarist, Jason Biehler, that guy through the 90s and even still now, which again I'm going to talk about later, just incredible. I had a non-sexual male crush on Jason Biehler, and maybe I still do. He was not just the at this point he was just a guitarist, but he wrote, I guess, most of the stuff, and it's easy to see as I go on how important Jason Biehler was to Saigon Kick. Not, I guess, to take anything away from anybody else. But this album, this album was pretty big. Everybody knows, if you're watching this, if you saw Saigon Kick, you probably wanted to hear me talk about Love Is On The Way, which was really their only hit. This was when Mr. Big had To Be With You, and Extreme had More Than Words, and that kind of, the ballads, especially the acoustic ballads. Maybe earlier, some years earlier, was the real power ballads like Home Sweet Home and what did Warrant have? Not Sometimes She Cries. Heaven, Poison, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, I Won't Forget You, things like that. So it's very unfair when people judge Saigon Kick by Love Is On The Way. They got the reputation as a hair band, which at that time in '92 was horrible. That was a death knell. You didn't want to be called a hair band in 1992. Maybe in 1987 you would really embrace that, but in 1992 that was the last thing you wanted anybody to call you. And so they got lumped in very unfairly as a hair band, and because they had the ballad. And not that Love Is On The Way is a bad song. I loved it at the time. I did get tired of it, as you do with these singles that you can't get away from. But Love Is On The Way was a great song, not even close to my favorite. Maybe my favorite on here, Hostile Youth, was another, and that was the first single or video from that album. I think if I remember correctly, I saw it before I had the album. Again, they used to sometimes put out videos in advance of the albums, and I think I saw the video for Hostile Youth before I bought this album. I'm almost sure I did. And again, just I as much as I liked What You Say when I heard the first album, when I heard Hostile Youth, just incredible. The very, very heavy song, and some other heavy songs on here. Freedom, although that was never a favorite. Maybe one that I don't really like from this album was Body Bags, a little bit of a knuckle dragger, kind of a Neanderthal meathead song. Not my favorite. But I would say my favorite on this one, I listened to this album yesterday, and I always liked this song, and it was always, when I listened to it yesterday, it was very clear. My favorite, I thought, this is so obvious. My favorite is World Goes Round, the second to last song. That's my favorite. But also Feel the Same Way is another good one. All I Want, which was another single and video for it, that was one I never got tired of. All I Want is just a fantastic song. Some other heavy ones, The Lizard, the title track, has the riff in that song is brutal. All Right is another good one, kind of a little bit also heavy there. And they had Chanel. Chanel was a song which they continued for the next two albums. That was kind of a fun, jazzy, happy sounding song, but very kind of morbid lyrics. So this album, can you believe that this was maybe even better than the second album? And other than Love Is On The Way, it's hard to say this flopped, because this was much bigger than the first album. But I don't think this one, I don't need to hold it anymore. I don't think The Lizard did as well as it should have. They seemed like a band that was really gonna just take off. But again, maybe the timing was bad. So The Lizard is The Lizard and the first album. I love them both, let's say for today, equally. All right. Next was 1993, and I haven't mentioned my concert history with Saigon Kick, and there's a reason for that, which I'll talk about that now before I get to this album, Water. I didn't see them with Cheap Trick. They came with, I think it was in 92 or early 93, they came back to Massey Hall opening for Extreme, which I thought was a great matchup because you had Jason Bieler and Saigon Kick and Nuno Betancourt in Extreme, and they were both, I was never a big Extreme fan, although I love Pornography, but I thought that was a great tour, Extreme and Saigon Kick. I don't know why I didn't go to that show. I'm not sure. Water, I can't remember. But anyway, I'm going to talk about this now. Huge changes were abound with this album. I'm going to put it down for a minute. Matt Kramer, the singer of Saigon Kick, he didn't die. I'm doing this. He didn't die. He didn't get his throat cut. He left the band or got fired. I'm not sure. And as I've mentioned before in these videos that I do, obviously for most people, the most important band member is the singer. If you hate the singer, it's very hard to like a band. And if you love the singer, if you like the guy's voice, you're probably gonna love the band. Maybe even if you think the music is so-so, if you like the singer's the main thing. So Matt Kramer's gone. I thought, man, how can this be? How can my favorite band and they look like they were really gonna take off and be the stars of the scene, and Matt Kramer was gone. Now again, going back to the wonky memory, I can't remember if I knew he was gone before this album came out, or if I bought this album and looked at it and saw, and Matt Kramer is missing. In any case, he was gone. Now I remember I bought this album at when I lived in Guelph at the time. There was a record store. It was downtown Guelph. There's not a single person watching this that has any idea what I'm talking about. There used to be a strip club downtown called the Chooch, and beside it there was a record store, which I can't remember the name of, but it was a good store, and I bought it there. I used to buy a lot of records there, or CDs, whatever. And I went in there and I bought it, and I think it was then that I discovered that, so I found this, Water, and now you can see on the back, conspicuous by his absence, as Gorilla Monsoon says, no Matt Kramer. So it was Jason Beeler. Now Jason was singing lead and playing guitar. Phil Varone was still on drums, and they had a new guy called Chris McClernand playing bass. Tom DeFile was the bass player on the first two albums. They had this handsome fella here. His name is Chris McClernand. And when bands change members, your first instinct is to raise your eyebrow, and it's not a positive thing. Typically, member changes. I like this album better than the other two. I just talked about how much I love the first album, and then I like the Lizard more. This was even better. Now, the thing about Jason taking over lead vocals on this, it made you really realize how much he sang on the first two albums, and how much he really made the Saigon Kick sound. It totally reminds me of Jerry Cantrell with Alice in Chains. Again, to be clear, I'm not saying that Saigon Kick and Alice in Chains sound the same. They don't. They're not even close. But just in the fact that they're guitarists, but they really did more than sing backup vocals. Jerry Cantrell had a huge role in Alice in Chains, which became very obvious after Lane Staley died, and even I think while he was alive, when Alice in Chains played live, you saw, wow, Jerry Cantrell. I heard these voices when I listened to their records, and I didn't realize how much Jerry Cantrell sang. And that's the same with Jason Beeler, who I think at this point was just calling himself Jason. I think he didn't like Beeler. Yeah, it says produced by Jason. The Lizard was produced by Jason Beeler, so he was going for a Cher, Madonna type thing. But this album, oh my God, it's incredible. And I haven't even got to my favorite Saigon Kick album, which is, I guess, pretty obvious coming up next. So it really was not that much different than the first two albums, especially not different than The Lizard. Just that it was Jason singing. Now for me, as much as I loved Saigon Kick, the first two albums, And Matt Kramer too. I thought he was just an incredible singer. I like Jason even more. I think that when you hear the songs from the first album live, and something I'm going to talk about later, some old songs that surfaced much later as demos of old songs that Matt Kramer sang, but Jason sang them originally on the demos. I like them better. I got to say, I love Matt Kramer, but for me, Jason Biehler is clearly the best singer for Saigon Kick. Maybe because it's him singing his own material. So this album, not that much different. Like I said, it had that perfect mixture of really heavy stuff, like the opening song, One Step Closer, but also just unbelievably beautiful, not just ballads, but things like, I'll say right now, probably my two favorite songs on this one are the title track, Water. Water flows down upon your face, my love for you won't die. And The Way, which are two of the softer songs on the album. I don't necessarily, I love Slayer. Slayer's one of my favorite bands. Motorhead, Metallica, Exodus. I'm a metal guy, but I think Saigon Kick, I didn't need them to be heavy, although I did love their heavy stuff. So The Way and Water, the title track, are probably my two favorites on this one. Something really unique about Water, the title track, the song, not the album, was it was very, very different. This was very. It sounded. I don't know if the drums were live drums or if they were programmed. And I'm not saying anything bad about it, because if you're paying attention, I just said a few seconds ago it's my favorite song. But it had a very. It sounded. It just sounded different for Saigon Kick, but man, I loved it and I still love it. Now the heavy songs on this one, as I said, One Step Closer. As soon as I heard that, to me it sounded like Zakk Wylde playing. Jason's guitar had a really pinch harmonics, I guess you call them. Very, very heavy song. And Torture was also heavy. When You Were Mine that's another great one. A very happy, not ballady song, but just incredible. This album, this is 3 in a row where they got better. They also did a cover of Space Oddity by David Bowie, which I'm going to say it, I like it better than the original. I was never a big David Bowie fan, but Saigon Kick made this enough of the pointing. I have this thing with pointing, like a monkey. Monkey's points, that's what Homer says. Or that's what the guy said to Homer, monkey's point. Yeah, Space Oddity was great. It was obviously, I mean, you heard it right away, and you know it wasn't that much different that you would say, is this Space Oddity? But it was different enough that you go, oh, this is really, really different. So Water is just incredible, and it got better. Saigon Kick, Water. It got even better with Devil in the Details, 1995. This is my favorite Saigon Kick album. I could tell you, it wouldn't be a lie if I told you this is my favorite album of the 90s. There are some other ones, and I would maybe have to rethink that. But I probably, at least in terms of the number of times I listened to it, this was probably my most listened to album of the 90s. I can think of 2 other ones, and they're the 2 bands that I mentioned before that I'm going to talk about their discography at some point. Those albums I maybe listen to more, but Devil in the Details. If anybody's watching this and you don't recognize this is because this is the German import version. That was my level of Saigon Kick fandom, was that I did buy the import version. I did have the original version in 1995 when it came out. I think I got this one quite a few years later. I think I got this in the internet era, maybe around 99 or 2000. And because it had 2 bonus tracks, Sky is Falling and The One. And back then, it was hard to, the only way I could hear these songs was if I bought this album for a second time. You couldn't download, there was no Spotify, streaming, YouTube, something like that. So this was 95. By this point, nobody cared about Saigon Kick except me. And a very, very small hardcore group of people. But this is unquestionably my favorite Saigon Kick album. Water is close, but this is clearly better. It's amazing how versatile Saigon Kick was, But at the same time, all their albums, they weren't really different from one another. This had, again, just the most perfect mix of heavy, like, what was really heavy on here? I guess maybe All Around, Killing Ground for sure. And then I had the beautiful songs, Spanish Rain, Afraid, Sunshine. These were great songs. Going On was another nice one, a great, not really a ballad, but good acoustic guitar. Now the bonus, now I'll get to my favorite songs on this. Maybe my most listened to song was Russian Girl. And I loved, they did an intro to Russian Girl, which is a very Lion King thing that, to me, it's part of Russian Girl, the song. I can't listen to one. I have to listen to them together. Yeah, maybe Russian Girl, Let Me Stay a While, Please Let Me Stay a While, Russian Girl. In the summer of 95 and probably 96 too, my best friend in Toronto at the time, when we used to drive anywhere, when it was my car, we listened to my music, and I can't say I forced him to listen to this, because I think he bought the first 2 Saigon Kick albums, but I think I drilled the song Russian Girl into, he kind of lost track with Saigon Kick, Poser. But I drilled Russian Girl into his head, and I think he liked that song. So I think maybe Russian Girl is my favorite, and Flesh and Bone, which really reminds me of, this is going to sound strange, really reminds me of, and always did, of Wherever I May Roam by Metallica. The intro is very similar. It doesn't sound like Wherever I May Roam, but it has a few of the same aspects. It has the vibe of Wherever I May Roam. Now there's another song on here called Eden, which was, again, a very unique song. It had kind of a, I don't know if it was a real piano in it, or like if it was programmed, but it had, it always reminded me of, the melody reminded me of Broadway. I guess it's Frank Sinatra. Dun, 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 on Broadway. It always reminded me of that. And that's an excellent song too. But man, I can't say enough how much I love this one. Now the bonus tracks, Sky is Falling. Oh, now speaking of bonus tracks, I forgot Water had Never Enough, which totally sounded like Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth. But Sky is Falling was one of the bonus tracks on the German edition. And the one that might be one of my, it is one of my favorite Saigon Kicks ever. That's a totally unique sound. It doesn't, if you like Saigon Kick because of Month of Sundays or Body Bags or something like that, you would hate the one, because it's not a ballad. It's a very nice, it is kind of like a love, like a romantic song, but it's a very fun song. And it sounds, again, like it has programmed drums similar to Water, but again, no problem. Those are 2 of my favorite Saigon Kick songs ever. So yeah, the one, it's amazing that the bonus track, which in many cases I think are throwaways, that the one is my favorite. Now this also had a lineup change. This was still Jason, of course, still Phil Verone on drums, still Chris McClernand on bass. They had a guy here called Pete Dombrowski. They added a second guitarist. I think he had played with them live. I think they had him as a touring guitarist during Water. I'm not sure, but this was the first album that he played on. And I'm not sure how much he played. I think I have it on, I think, good authority that he's all over this album. But anyway, incredible album. And a little different look. I think this was maybe another reason people didn't embrace Saigon Kick. They had a very different look. Jason had I think you call it the reverse pie slice haircut. He had like a mohawk, but it was cut shaved like a pie here. And you can see Phil Verone had a mohawk, and Pete Dombrowski had long hair. Chris McClernand had short hair. So nobody knew. The hair metal people, I mean, this was 95, that was long over, but I think people didn't know what to make of Saigon Kick. A lot of people said they were ahead of their time, which may have been true. Very unique. But man, oh man, 1995, this was the album for me for 1985. I can't even remember another album that came out in 95. Metallica Load was 96. Pantera had albums in 94 and 96. Hands down, the best album of 95, and maybe one of my top 5, maybe top 3, maybe even number 1 albums of the 90s. This was called Devil in the Details, and you should listen to it. That was almost it. There's still a lot more to go. Sorry. But that was basically it. Now in maybe 98 or something, and I did buy it, but I don't have it with me now. They had a compilation album, which was called Greatest Misses. Not Greatest Hits, but Greatest Misses, and it was MRS. Haha, you get it. And it was a compilation album from their 4 studio albums up to that point, and I think 3 live songs. It was 3 live songs, and there was an unreleased song called Hey Hey Hey, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And Marilyn Manson, he didn't write the liner notes for it, but Marilyn Manson came up in South Florida, I guess, around the time of Saigon Kick, and he was a huge Saigon Kick fan. I always thought Saigon Kick kind of missed the chance to promote themselves by not playing up the Marilyn Manson angle. But he didn't write the liner notes, but they included a scan or a picture of something that Marilyn Manson, when he was Brian Warner, before he became Marilyn Manson, that he had written for a local Florida magazine about how much he loved Saigon Kick when they were a local band. So that was Greatest Misses. Nothing special about that album. It was like most compilations. It was, I guess, the lure of 3 live songs, and especially an unreleased song, was why I bought it. But then in '99, this was Moments from the Fringe. This was another one that had 2 different album covers. Jason Beeler, he was one of the first guys. I remember reading about Jason Beeler in the 90s, talking about something called the internet, and he was taking advantage of releasing music digitally, and that you could buy his music online. And I bought this online. I bought this in 1999 from a place called BVB Music. BVB was Baron von Bielski, which was Jason Beeler's his alias, or a nickname that I guess he gave himself. And he had a website called BVB Music, where it's hard to explain. Music sites, everything was different. This was in 98, 99. And you could listen to his music back then, and you could also order this, which I did. This was one of the very, very early things I ever ordered on the internet. Maybe the first. There was another one that I thought was before it, but this was. So this was called Moments from the Fringe. This was another compilation, but very different than the Greatest Misses, which was all previously released material. This was 100% previously unreleased. This was, what is it, about 20 songs on here, something like this. Mostly, this was 97 or 98. This was almost all demos, but they did have one. The first song was called Dizzy's Vine. They briefly got back together with Matt Kramer in 96 or 97, and it was Matt, Jason, Phil, and I think it was Chris McLaren at the time. I don't think it was Tom DeFile. And they recorded this song called Dizzy's Vine, and I loved it again, going back to the other ones, what I said earlier, I loved it as much as anything I had heard from Saigon Kick. And at this point, they had been around for 8 years, and I couldn't believe that there was a band that had been around that long that I loved something 8 years later as much as I did their first album. So Dizzy's Vine was the only new song on here, and very, very different. It had, it wasn't heavy at all. It did have guitars, but it had synthesizers or keyboards. If you were a metal fan or a hard rock fan or a glam metal or whatever you call these bands, you would have hated this. This was not for you, and this was also not for the thrash metal people. This was not for the alternative people, the people that were listening to Smashing Pumpkins. Totally different. Just the most, maybe one of the most unique bands I've ever heard. There's another one that I could mention that I might do a video for. So there were some songs on here that were demos of old songs. Some were from The Lizard, some were from the Jason albums. Now, there were a couple. God of 42nd Street, Feel the Same Way, which were originally on The Lizard, but as I mentioned earlier, these were demos that Jason had done. Jason did these, so it was him singing. As I mentioned earlier, I like those better. I like his versions better than Matt's. Hostile Youth was another one. But I think Matt sang on this demo. All I Want was another one from the Lizard that on the demo here. Jason sang that one. But there were, and Love Is On The Way, there was a demo version of that with just Jason and a acoustic guitar, pardon the stuttering. But a lot of songs that were completely, not new songs, but unreleased. There was also an acoustic version of Colors. Hey, 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 as I mentioned, that was on Greatest Misses. Homeland, Beautiful, My Only Friend. Spidey the Rapist. Spidey the Rapist went to Sweden. You couldn't sing a song like this anymore, I think. Me Too, hashtag Me Too. What else was new on here? There was a When You Were Mine, which was on Water, and there was a demo version of Here. Hostile Youth, I think I said that. You and I was a great one from Water that was never released. Great song. My Heart Screams. Salvation was another completely unreleased song, and the Lizard. This, I mean, even though this is just a collection, and I guess for real hardcore people, as full albums from beginning to end, this is as good as The Lizard. It's as good as Devil in the Details and Water in the first album. When this came out, or when I received this and I got it, or when I ordered online, I listened to it constantly. This is the first new Saigon Kick music I had heard, I guess at that point, for about 4 years. So I was very, very excited to hear it. Favorite on this one, really hard to say. I do love Spidey the Rapist. He found the girl of his dreams. She had a mohawk and a drink, which made her fair game to him. What else? My Only Friend, a beautiful song. It's Jason says it was like a Sesame Street song, which it was. It was a very happy, fun, really, really nice song. Beautiful song. Homeland was, I love every song on here. Beautiful was maybe more like an original. That was very different for Saigon Kick too. That was a little bit more of a straight ahead rock song. That could have been, that, again, it doesn't sound like, but it could have been a Motley Crue song or something like that. Spot 'em a Beer, another kind of fun, crazy, different song. You and I, again, a lot of great songs on here. This is a fantastic album. I think there are maybe 17 people in the world who have this album, and I'm one, and I love it. Next, now, this was, this is another one I don't have in front of me. In 1999, Saigon Kick released an album called Bastards, and I hated that title. I thought Bastards was a really bad title for a Saigon Kick album. I'm a huge Motorhead fan, and Motorhead had an album called Bastards in 1993. In my opinion, the last really, really good Motorhead album. And Bastards is very appropriate for a Motorhead song album title. For Saigon Kick, it's not offensive to me. It doesn't bother me. I just thought, man, for a band like Saigon Kick, it always bugged me a little bit that they called the album Bastards. Kind of an interesting thing about that was the first, and as I can think of now, the only album that had emoticons on it. This was in 1999. Jason was ahead of the game. He put the yellow emoticons on the cover of Bastards. Everything about this album was a fail except the music. The cover kind of sucked. The album title sucked. It seemed like it was, I never disliked it. Some of it I really, really liked. But to me, it was a totally 100% different sound than Saigon Kick. It was much more straight ahead rock. It didn't have this Saigon Kick uniqueness, although they were still great songs. I guess as long as Jason Beeler is writing songs, I'm going to like them. But they were straight ahead rock songs, and I don't know what was happening, and I'm not even sure who played on that album at the time. That one I had to buy. That one I think was only released in Japan. That one I bought either on eBay or Amazon. This was when Amazon, I think, only sold books and CDs. But it was another one I only bought that I think it was only available online, at least if you're in North America. But I bought that, and it was, I'm not sure. That album is still a little bit of a mystery to me. Because later, or around the same time, I think it was later, Jason on his BVB website, as I mentioned, he released a bunch of songs, many of which were on Bastards. I can't remember if Bastards came out before or after. A Lot Like You was one. I think they were a little bit different. A Lot Like You, maybe We Never Met. That was a strange time. A lot of these songs have two versions. They had like a Saigon Kick version, and then later maybe it was like a super transatlantic version, which I'll maybe talk about a little bit later. But I think now at this point, not Chris McClernand, Phil Varone was out. He wasn't playing drums. It was a new guy called Ricky Sanders, who was in a great band called Wobble that I think I might be the only person in the world who, I have it over here. I have the Wobble CD. Wobble was a really cool band. So Ricky Sanders, who's the opposite, he's the anti-Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl started playing drums and then switched to singing and guitar. Ricky Sanders started in Wobble, playing guitar and singing, and then he switched to drums in Saigon Kick. I think Phil Varone just played on one song. I think he played on Nearer, which was the last song. Chris McClernand, I guess, played bass, or he was credited, although maybe Jason played some bass, I'm not sure. So Bastards is a weird album for me. It was the only Saigon Kick album that I didn't say, my God, when I first heard it. Not bad. I actually, as I said, I do like a lot of it. Now there was also, I'm not sure, a lot of this is very confusing. As I mentioned earlier, man, oh man, I'm really, really rambling here. With Devil in the Details, I mentioned that maybe my favorite song was The One. Somewhere around this time, now, I don't think, there was the original version of The One, which wasn't on Bastards, but maybe Jason released it later on BBB. It's not even the same song. I don't really like it. It was much more like a kind of, to me, like a cheesy power ballad. It was much, much better. The original, to go from the original demo to the version that was on Devil in the Details was one of the biggest steps up in music history because I love The One. The original version, it was just a cheesy, grand power ballad. Not that good. Now, going on, continuing with Saigon Kick, maybe in 2001, I wouldn't say they released, it was under the name Saigon Kick, a live album. I think it was called Greatest Hits Worldwide or Worldwide Live to Scorpions, something like that. Greatest Hits Worldwide or Saigon Kick Live, something like that. Now, from what I remember, there was a lot of bad blood about this album. Apparently, I guess Phil Varone, the drummer, had some live recordings. Somehow he had them, and he basically put this live album out himself. He didn't write. He didn't write any of the songs. He played on the albums and he played on the live albums. But I think there was a lot of bad blood between him at the time because maybe he had no right to put out the live album, and it wasn't that good. It just wasn't put together very well. I think they were all taken from different shows. Maybe they all sounded different. They maybe each song had a different lineup, something like that. It was basically just like a collection of various live songs from over the year. I guess recorded from the soundboard. Now I do remember, I maybe listened to that album once or twice and never again since 2001. Although I mentioned that The Way from Water might be my favorite song on that album. The live version of The Way that's on that live album is fantastic. I maybe like that better than the studio album. So that live album was a waste of time, really. It's pretty pointless. That's it. I think that's it for Saigon Kick. Now, this is the bonus. This is when this gets released to Blu-ray. This is going to be the bonus disc. This is the extra stuff. I'm going to talk about Jason Beeler, all right? Again, with my non-gay, non-sexual crush on Jason Beeler. Jason Biehler is maybe my favorite musician of all time. I mentioned earlier he could be my favorite singer. He could be my favorite guitarist. But I think more than anything, nobody, maybe Prince or somebody like that, nobody is more, or was, or I think even still is more proficient than Jason Biehler. This guy was just constantly doing something with music. And in also, I think, 1998, Jason, who really is Saigon Kick, he released this album on his own label on BVB, which I mentioned. This was called Houston, We Have a Problem. And he released this independently. He had BVB Music later. He had Beeler Brothers Records with his brother Aaron. And this, man, I'm telling you, this is as good. Forget about what I said about Devil in the Details being my favorite Saigon Kick album. This is better than Devil in the Details. My God, what an album this is. Now, at the time this came out, Saigon Kick was more or less over. This is, in many ways, couldn't be any more different than Saigon Kick. Again, if you like Saigon Kick's heavier stuff, and if you like rock, and if you like heavy music, you will hate this album. There are many songs on this that are flat out 100% dance or rave or electronic music or something. I love them. Now, this is not and I think this is why I don't love this album because I love Jason. I think I love Jason because I love this album. I listen to this as much as I listen to Devil in the Details and Water. The first song, Control, is that's maybe the closest you'll get to, if you were an old Saigon Kick fan, maybe Control is the closest you'll get to having a Jason Beeler rock song. Other than that, every song on here was pretty much, not a lot of guitar on this, very a little bit of acoustic. John and Paul, which is another great song. If I were John and you were Paul. One Fine Day, that's a good acoustic song. Very, very unique album. This is like, if Saigon Kick was, like nothing you've ever heard before, this was that much more, crazy and unique than Saigon Kick was. Favorite song on this one? Ooh, almost everyone. This is like Devil in the Details. Maybe Control. I do like the rock songs sometimes too. Jupiter, In Between Jupiter and Mars. Total rave dance song. One Fine Day, as I mentioned. Maybe Shadows Over Love. It's called Shadows. Shadows Over Love are beaten. Treason. Can You Feel It Coming Faster? What are the lyrics? Can you feel it coming faster? Right Behind Your Newfound Master. Treason, it's a great song. Who Do You Love is very fun. That's a piano song. Very, very fun songs. Kind of in the same vein as My Only Friend, although that was acoustic guitar. I don't know how many people have this album, but it might be less than 10, and I'm one of them. This is better than any Beatles album. There, what do you think of that? Forget about the Rolling Stones. Go listen to Houston Has a Problem by Jason Beeler. And just perfect. Now, later, I'm getting excited. I'm sweating. I'm getting out of control. In 2000, I guess it was, 2001, Jason again. He started, no, I guess it was earlier than that. Oh, there's such a warped timeline. Very hard to remember all these things. Very briefly, Jason had a band called Flat. And they recorded maybe 20 songs, and Jason released them on his BVB website. I think back then he had all these songs, and you could pick the songs, and he would burn them on a CD and send you that CD in the mail. Very, very, again, very ahead of the time. This was 98, 97, 98. And you could, of the 20 or 25 songs, you could pick 18 or something like that, and he would burn them onto a CD. Of course, I ended up getting all of them. A lot of those were, I guess, turned out to be Flat demos, which then later became Super Transatlantic. Again, this is very hard to remember. There was Flat, Super Transatlantic, Jason Solo, Saigon Kick, BVB Music, Beeler Brothers. Very, very hard to remember all this. It was very exciting at that time. This was in the very, very early days of the internet. It was very exciting to just have access to all this music that wasn't being released in by traditional means. You couldn't buy this in record stores. It wasn't CDs that you could order from Amazon or anything like that. So Super Transatlantic had one album called Shuttlecock, one official album. This was a little bit Saigon Kick. This was, to me, where Bastards left off. It was Jason, of course, Pete Dembrowski, who had been on Devil in the Details. Pat Badger, the bass player from Extreme, was the bass player in Super Transatlantic. And Ricky Sanders, again, from the great Wobble. And they put an album in put out an album in 2000 called Shuttlecock. Before that, they had one song called Super Down that was on the American Pie soundtrack. And I loved it. To me, I didn't, I mean, I had my favorites, but I also couldn't say I liked one thing better than the other. I just, you know, there was nobody else, especially at that time, whose music I liked as much as Jason Bieler's. And I didn't really care what umbrella he put it out under. Now, he also had some other solo songs, another 20 or something solo songs, which were in addition to what he was doing with Flat and everything. This guy has written a lot of songs. I think most people don't realize just how active this guy is and still is. Owl Stretching. What is that? What the hell is Owl Stretching? It's a terrible name for a band is what it is. When I heard that Jason was doing this band or project called Owl Stretching, I thought it was an awful name. I understand it's from a Monty Python skit, but I didn't care. I thought, that name sucks. But that doesn't change anything because I like Owl Stretching as much as I like Saigon Kick. And as much as I love Houston We Have a Problem, and as much as I love Super Transatlantic and Shuttlecock and everything. And now this is really difficult to explain. Owl Stretching, I think originally was a band, or the idea was a band. It was going to be Jason. I think he got together originally with Chris McClernand, and I think also Ricky Sanders, maybe just the three of them. Maybe they did one song like that. I'm not even sure. The idea was it was going to be a band, but I think that didn't last very long. And Jason just started recording songs on his own. He has a home studio. And so the first one he released was not a remixing. It was a completely different, brand new version of The Lizard, the title track from the 1992 Lizard album in 2002. Sorry, The Lizard was 92. This was in 2012. And it was The Lizard. It was the new version, and it had the same skeleton as the Lizard, but very, very different. And then since then, I guess since about 2012, under the Owl Stretching name, he would put out a song today, and then maybe next week put out another song, and then 2 months later put out 2 more songs. And then a week later, put another song. It was just completely random. There was no schedule. You know, I remember going on Facebook and seeing, new Owl Stretching song. And he has a Bandcamp, and you know, you can listen to them there, stream them, or download them, whatever. Following in the same vein as Saigon Kick, which was there was no, you know, he wasn't following a formula. Some stuff was some Owl Stretching stuff was and is as wacky as any Saigon Kick stuff or any of Jason's solo stuff from Houston We Have a Problem. To me, it's really a continuation of Houston We Have a Problem. Very, very strange songs, and none of them, every one sounds different than the one he put out before. Not too much guitar. Again, they're not for the Saigon Kick fans. If you like, you know, the heavy side of Saigon Kick, you're not gonna like Owl Stretching. Now, Owl Stretching, then at some point, he just started calling himself Jason Beeler again. He explained it once. He does, and going back to BVB in 98 and 99, Jason always did cool stuff with fans. He did like live chats, even going back to 98. He would say, I'm going to be online on BVB, so come to the chat room. And so he explained a few years ago about the morphing from Owl Stretching to Jason Beeler. I think he said it was just easier. It was maybe confusing to people what Owl Stretching was because it wasn't a band. Although I think Chris McClernand played on at least one song, which was Keep Calm and Carry On. And I think Ricky Sanders played on a few songs. Very hard to keep track. I looked on my phone earlier. I have 240 Jason under the, you know, where it shows your artist. Under Jason Beeler, I have 240 or 260 songs, something like that. Some of those are repeats because he put them out as singles, and then he would group all the singles together and put them out as an EP, only through Bandcamp. He hasn't released anything physically. I would guess under the Jason Beeler brand, I guess is what you call it now. He probably has 180 or 200 songs, maybe something like that, all available for download on. I feel like I'm his publicist or his agent or his manager. On Jason Beeler, on his Bandcamp, you can go and you can listen to these. He's now working on, I mean, he's calling it a solo album. It's for Frontier's record. I have no idea when it's coming out. I do know Jeff Scott Soto is singing on it. I assume it's basically, I think what he does is, or what he's done with Owl Stretching / Jason Beeler, is he records a song and he says, here it is. Kind of like what I do with these videos. And I'm not comparing myself to Jason Beeler, but he goes in his studio, in his house, he records a song, and he has it online within an hour or 2 hours, and you can listen to it and download it. So I think this is based on purely my speculation, not on anything he's said. I get the idea that now he hasn't put any songs out for maybe 8 months or a year, maybe something like that. I get the idea that he has all these songs ready, they're in the hopper, they're ready to go, and he's just collecting them all, and then he's going to put them all out as an album through Frontier's record. So I've run out of things to say about Jason Beeler and Saigon Kick. Also, I'm getting very tired, and it's hard on your back to stand in one position for a long time and not shift your weight. So, but yeah, Jason Beeler, I don't know what else to say other than he's maybe my favorite musician ever. I'm not saying he's the greatest or the best, but in terms of just consistency, and the guy never takes a break, and you never know what to expect from him. Jason Beeler, for me, forget about, I hate to say it, but forget about Faith No More, and forget about Pearl Jam and Metallica and Iron Maiden. Jason Beeler, and maybe a kind of cool thing about Jason too is it's kind of cool when I feel like he's, this sounds gay, that he's my, you know, nobody really knows about him, and it's kind of like when I listen to Metallica in '83 and '84 when nobody knows about them. It's kind of something that you hold dear, you hold close to you because it feels like your thing. I wish he would become really successful, although in another way I hope he doesn't, because that would maybe change it for it. But so that's it. Jason Beeler, Saigon Kick, Super Transatlantic, Flat. I didn't even mention the Saigon Kick demos that were never released. I would have to say I'm one of the world's foremost authorities on all things Saigon Kick. They have Motion. There are 2 versions of the song Motion. They did a cover of Love My Way by Psychedelic Furs, which might have been as Flat. They did Mr. Brown. What else? Annabelle. There are many Saigon Kick songs and Jason songs, I think, that a lot of people have never heard. I think also if you check my YouTube channel, you'll find some ultra super mega rare Saigon Kick footage from long time ago. So even when I say I'm done, I'm not done. That's it. That's I can't really, I could say a lot more, but I don't want to. Jason Beeler, Saigon Kick, Super Transatlantic, Flat, everything, demos, unreleased, everything. What a musical smorgasbord this guy has produced for me in my life. Super important in my life. Music is just about my favorite thing. It's great when you're feeling good. It's maybe even better when you're feeling bad, and nothing for me is as good as music, and nothing I think has been as good for me as Jason Beeler music. That's it for now. Stay tuned. I'm going to do a couple more, and thanks for watching or scrolling or whatever you did. See ya.